Hello everyone and welcome to Wise IAS, your true companion in UPSC preparations. आज के इस लेक्चर में हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं इंडिया और श्रीलंका के रिलेशंस, साथ ही साथ इंडिया और भूटान के रिलेशंस। ये दोनों बहुत छोटी छोटी कंट्रीज हमारे नेबरहुड पर बहुत स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस रखती है। फिलहाल पिछले कुछ समय में श्रीलंका तो बहुत ही लाइमलाइट में रहा बिकॉज ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस, और उसमें इंडिया की क्या भूमिका रही या रह सकती थी, ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। तो लेट अस बिगिन विद, सबसे पहले इंडिया श्रीलंका के बारे में चर्चा करेंगे। श्रीलंका हैज अ स्पेशल प्लेस इन इंडियन हार्ट्स। हमारे दिलों में श्रीलंका के लिए बहुत ही खास है। गिवन द टाइम टेस्टेड बॉन्ड्स गोइंग बैक ऑलमोस्ट इन वेरी बिगिनिंग ऑफ रिकॉर्डेड हिस्ट्री इन दी सब, अगर हम पीछे जाएं, समय में कुछ पीछे जाएं, तो श्रीलंका और इंडिया की बहुत गहरी दोस्ती हमें देखने में मिलेगी। Our relationship is built upon the strong foundations of shared cultural and socio-economic heritage and extensive people-to-people interaction over millennia. अब देखा जाए तो श्रीलंका में जो भाषा बोली जाती है वो भी इंडिया में बहुत मेल खाती है। तेलुगु पीपल लिव देयर, आपने सुना होगा सिन्हाला कम्युनिटी के बारे में। और श्रीलंका में बेसिकली दो कम्युनिटीज हैं, और द कल्चर एंड द लैंग्वेज is very much similar to that of Indians, specifically in Tamil Nadu region. Pre-independence relations की अगर बात करें, the earliest mention of Sri Lanka dates back to the time of Ramayana. Ravan was held Sita captive in Lanka. जो रावण सीता माँ को उठाकर ले गए थे वो लंका में रखे थे। Was rescued by Ram with the help of हनुमान। तो हनुमान जी सागर पार करके पहले सीता माता का पता लगाने गए, और फिर जब वापस आके उन्होंने इंश्योर कर दिया कि राम जी को कि सीता माँ को लंका में रखा गया, तो एक राम सेतु पुल का निर्माण किया गया। अब भी अगर आप इंडिया और श्रीलंका के बीच में देखें तो उसमें आपको एक लाइन दिखेगी, दैट इज व्हाट द राम सेतु पुल। The relations go back to the times of advent of Buddhism. Buddhism as a movement spread over Sri Lanka some 2000 years ago. The north and northeast region of Lanka has been economically integrated in India. The native people of Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, were colonially under the British but were not a part of British India Empire, being administered separately. From the 1830 onwards, British acquired indentured labor from India, especially from Tamil Nadu, in Ceylon to Ceylon. The Tamils who were transported by the British settled in the northern part of Ceylon. Right? पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस रिलेशन की बात करें, इंडिया बिकेम इंडिपेंडेंट इन 1947 while Ceylon in 1948. After Ceylon became independent, the Sinhalese government discriminated against Tamils, thereby deepening the void in Indian Ceylon relations. Ceylon devised a mechanism to make it tough for Tamils to acquire state citizenship. They also wanted to ensure they put an end to Tamil dominance in public services. Though the Sinhalese language barrier they made it tough for Tamil administrators. अब भैया क्योंकि वो पार में थे, उन्होंने लैंग्वेज बैरियर क्रिएट कर दिया कि सिन्हेलिस लैंग्वेज जो है वो बैरियर रहेगी, वो क्लियर करेंगे तो आप ये पब्लिक सर्विसेज में आएंगे। तो तमिल स्पीकिंग लोगों के लिए बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो गया। हाउएवर इन 1964 देयर वाज अ शास्त्री सिरिमावो पैक्ट that was signed whereby Ceylon agreed to give 3 lakh Indian Tamils in Ceylon citizenship, and India also agreed to repatriate a sizable number of India. However, the matter of repatronization, the matter of repartition did not complete till 1988. After the 1971 Indo-Pak War, Indian allegiance shifted towards the USSR as Sri Lanka gradually drifted towards the US. तो श्रीलंका धीरे धीरे यूएस की तरफ जाना शुरू हो गया। जय वार्डनी एडवांस a liberal and open economy and positioned Sri Lanka westward. तो श्रीलंका को धीरे धीरे उधर की तरफ खींचा जा रहा। The situation especially deteriorated in 1977 and 1981 due to Tamil riots. वहां दंगे होने शुरू हो गए और सिचुएशन और डिटीरियोरेट हो गई। Post 1980, India adopted a very delicate policy. It is widely alleged by scholars and theorists that India used the research and analysis wing RNAW to train Tamil rebels in Sri Lanka. The aim was to use Tamil rebels to destabilize the Jayawardene regime, and also while ensuring that the Tamil rebels do not succeed in creating a separate state. कि भैया वो अपना अलग देश। It was in 1976 that the liberation of Tamil Tigers Elam LTTE, a separatist and insurgent militant force, was formed by V. Prabhakaran. As the research and analysis wing had gradually succeeded in destabilizing the Sri Lankan government, it slowly stopped supporting the rebels. But by this time, the LTTE had emerged as a powerful force and began to assert itself as the sole representative of Tamils in Sri Lanka. कि भैया हम ही हैं इनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव और कोई नहीं। When Indira Gandhi died, Jayawardene took the help of Pakistan and the US to get Sri Lankan forces trained to counter the LTTE rebels. In 1987, Jayawardene formally requested India to oppose any kind of military intervention by LTTE in Sri Lanka, but India failed to act. India-Sri Lanka Accord ISLA had been signed on 29 July 1987, which assigned a certain amount of autonomy to Tamil areas. Tamil areas को उस दौरान autonomy दे दी। Sinhalese began to perceive India's role as an undue interference in Sinhalese internal affairs that was not in Sri Lanka's best interest. In November 1989, in the Indian elections, वीपी सिंह जीत गए मार्च 1990 में. It ended the IPKF mission. The IPKF was recalled to India in 1991. The LTT assassinated Rajiv Gandhi and then was subsequently designated as a terrorist organization. After the death of Rajiv Gandhi, many Tamil groups also began to stop supporting LTTE. As India realized the failure of its mission, it also felt the need to go for a fresh look at India's Sri Lanka policy. तो इस तरीके से इंडिया और श्रीलंका के रिलेशंस जो है एज अ बिग बिग ब्रदर बोलिए, लाइकवाइज नेपाल के लिए था, इंडिया की पॉलिसी श्रीलंका के लिए भी इस तरीके की रही है अपना डोमिनेंस एस्टैब्लिश करने के लिए. अब स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस की अगर बात करें तो स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंस इंडिया और श्रीलंका के रिलेशंस में, श्रीलंका इज लोकेटेड एट द साउदर्न टिप ऑफ द पेनिनसुलर इंडिया, is strategically important for India in the most comprehensive sense. किसी को इंडिया में आना है उधर से पहले श्रीलंका आए. The strategic importance of Sri Lanka was well realized by Britain for the security of both Britain, India, and the Indian Ocean, and they developed a major naval base. उन्होंने एक नेवल बेस बना दिया ट्रिनकमली में ऑन द ईस्टर्न कोस्ट, क्योंकि इंडियन ओशन और ब्रिटिशर्स इन इंडिया दोनों को संभालने के लिए वो एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पोस्ट थी. दिस आइलैंड नेशन लाइज astride the major sea lanes of communication from Europe to East Asia and the oil tanker routes from the oil producing countries of the Gulf to China, Japan and other Pacific countries. चाइना, जापान और बाकी की कंट्रीज में जाने के लिए थ्रू श्रीलंका रूट. इन द मिलिट्री सेंस it is important to United States as these same sea routes are used for transference of naval power from the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean and the Gulf. भैया मिलिट्री के भी रूट्स जो हैं वो यहाँ से होकर जाएंगे, तो इसलिए यूएस के लिए भी ये स्ट्रेटेजिक इंपॉर्टेंट है. इंडिया टू हैज अ वाइटल स्ट्रेटेजिक stake in Sri Lanka for her own security interest. An unfriendly Sri Lanka would strategically discomfort India. श्रीलंका और इंडिया के रिलेशंस अगर बेहतर नहीं होंगे तो श्रीलंका की लैंड को इस्तेमाल किया जा सकता है इंडिया के विरुद्ध. Sri Lanka is also strategically important to India in terms of her Indian Ocean strategy and in terms of networking of partners for her aims of establishing an Indian Ocean Rim community. For the Indian Navy, it is important as the switching of naval fleets from the Bay of Bengal to Arabian Sea and vice versa, the fleets have to take a round of Sri Lanka. Exposure to China's Belt and Road Initiative through terminals in the port of Colombo and the port of Hambantota, both of which have attract Chinese investment. China is one of the Sri Lanka's key trading partners. Deep water ports with the capacity to accommodate large vessels. अब बेसिकली श्रीलंका की लोकेशन, जियोग्राफिकल लोकेशन अगर आप देखें तो वो ऐसी है कि हर एक कंट्री चाहती है कि श्रीलंका के साथ हमारे अच्छे रिलेशंस. कंक्लूड करेंगे, स्ट्रेटेजिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज आर ऑलवेज फ्लीटिंग वंस एंड सो एट द केस ऑफ इंडिया फॉर्गिंग अ स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप विद श्रीलंका. The India differs because of domestic politics, compulsions. China is the waiting in the wings to fill the vacuum. The Chinese strategic and net of India would then be fully complete, and India will have no one to blame but itself. अब जो चाइना का इंटरवेंशन श्रीलंका के साथ बढ़ता जा रहा है, चाइना का इंटरवेंशन जो श्रीलंका के साथ बढ़ता जा रहा है, वो इस तरीके से आप मान लीजिए, चाइना इज ट्राइंग टू China is just trying to give a horror look to India through Sri Lanka or through the neighboring states. Neighboring states, by I mean the neighboring countries. Likewise, China is establishing some good relations with Nepal, with Bhutan, with Sri Lanka, with Pakistan. Why? Why not with India? What China is trying to do. We have discussed the debt trap policy of China. The same is done with Sri Lanka. The same is done with Sri Lanka. हमने चाइना के बारे में जब पढ़ा तो हमने डिटेल में इसको भी डिस्कस करा। तो लाइकवाइज इंडिया क्या ये चीज होने दे सकता है, और क्या कॉस्ट होगी इसकी? तो एक अच्छी पॉलिसी की जरूरत है। अब हम देखेंगे चैलेंजेस क्या हैं इंडो श्रीलंका रिलेशंस। चाइना फैक्टर इन इंडो श्रीलंका रिलेशंस। चाइना फैक्टर हमने ऑलरेडी डिस्कस करा। लैक ऑफ बाईपार्टीशन सपोर्ट टू इंडिया श्रीलंका टाइज सोड lack of bipartisan support to India-Sri Lanka ties soared precipitously when Mahendra Rajapaksa leased the strategically significant port of Hambantota to China, an issue highly sensitive to India. अब ये पोर्ट जब दे दिया चाइना को लीज, तो हमारे रिलेशंस और ज्यादा बिगड़ गए। एथनिक इश्यूज, इट इज द prolonged conflict between the Sinhalas majority and Tamil minority in Sri Lanka that has severely undermined bilateral ties in recent decades. The issue also involved war crimes, probe, and accountability issues in Sri Lanka. Fishing disputes. Given the proximity of territorial waters of both countries, especially in the Park Straits and the Gulf of Mannar, incidents of straying of fishermen are common. तो फिशिंग डिस्प्यूट्स रहते हैं कि भैया ये हमारा अधिकार है यहाँ फिशिंग करने का, ये तुम्हारा नहीं है। India and Sri Lanka enjoy a vibrant and growing economic and commercial partnership. अब इकोनॉमिक एंड कमर्शियल पार्टनरशिप की अगर बात करें, विच हैज विटनेस्ड कंसिडरेबल एक्सपेंशन ओवर द ईयर्स। ये हमारा काम जो है इकोनॉमिकली और कमर्शियली आपस में रिश्ते मजबूत किए रहे। द एंट्री इनटू फोर्स ऑफ इंडिया श्रीलंका फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट ISFTA इन 2000 ईयर में contributed significantly towards the expansion of trade between the two countries. Economic ties between the two countries also include a flourishing development partnership that encompasses areas such as infrastructure. किस किस फील्ड में ये हुआ? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में हुआ, कनेक्टिविटी, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन, हाउसिंग, हेल्थ, लाइवलीहुड, एंड रिहेबिलिटाइजेशन एजुकेशन में हुआ, इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट में। ट्रेड की अगर बात में करें, इंडिया हैज ट्रेडिशनली बीन अमंग श्रीलंका's largest trade partners and Sri Lanka remains among the largest trade partners of India in the SAARC. In 2020, India was Sri Lanka's second largest trading partner with bilateral merchandise trade amounting to about US dollar 3.6 billion. Sri Lankan exports to India have increased substantially since 2000 when ISLFTA came into force, and more than 60% of Sri Lanka's total exports to India over the past few years have used the ISFTA benefits. Interestingly, only about 5% of India's total exports to Sri Lanka in the past few years have used the ISFTA provisions, thereby indicating their overall competitiveness in Sri Lanka's market. इन्वेस्टमेंट की बात करें, इंडिया इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट कॉन्ट्रीब्यूटर्स एफडीआई में श्रीलंका जो करता है। नंबर ऑफ लीडिंग कंपनीज फ्रॉम इंडिया हैव इन्वेस्टेड एंड एस्टैब्लिश्ड देयर प्रेजेंस इन श्रीलंका। अकॉर्डिंग टू BOI, FDI from India amounted to about US dollar 1.7 billion during the period 2005 से 2019. The main investment from India are in the areas of petroleum, retail, tourism and hotel, manufacturing, real estate, telecommunication, banking and financial services. Similarly, investment by Sri Lankan companies in India are also surging and taking advantage of India's dynamic economy and wider market. सिग्निफिकेंट एग्जांपल्स क्या हैं? ब्रांडिक्स, डामरू, LTL होल्डिंग्स एंड अदर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन द सर्विसिंग एंड लॉजिस्टिक सेक्टर। अब फिशरमैन इशू क्या है? द इंसिडेंट विच लेड टू द डेथ ऑफ 4 इंडियन फिशरमैन, ये फिर से डिस्प्यूट में आया। इंडियन फिशरमैन went missing at the vented into Pork Strait. A few days later, the Sri Lankan Navy announced that it had recovered 4 bodies suspected to be the missing fishermen. As as news reached the shores of Indian states, Tamil Nadu protests erupted as more than 200 fishermen blocked roads. Issue क्या है? The maritime dispute between the India and Sri Lanka remains unsolved despite an agreement 47 years ago. Notwithstanding 1974 Indo-Lanka Maritime Boundary Agreement, Indo-Indian fishermen tend to cross the maritime border into Sri Lanka in the Pork Strait, which in turn leads to assaults by the Sri Lankan Navy. The fishermen were beaten to death by Sri Lankan naval officers. स्टोरी बिहाइंड फिशरमैन इशू जो है ये क्या है? फॉर सेंचुरीज इंडिया एंड श्रीलंका फिशरमैन कम्युनिटीज हैव बीन फिशिंग इन ईच अदर्स वाटर विदाउट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट। एक दूसरे के पानी में जाके हम आराम से मछलियां पकड़ रहे हैं। दिस सिनेरियो चेंज्ड व्हेन इंडिया एंड श्रीलंका साइंड 4 मैरीटाइम बाउंड्री एग्रीमेंट बिटवीन 1974 से 1976 तक, which defined their respective understanding of international maritime boundary between the two countries. The idea behind these agreements was they would facilitate law enforcement and resource management in the Pork Strait. कि भैया वहां से अच्छे से लॉ एनफोर्समेंट हो सके, ठीक है, और वहां के रिसोर्सेज जो है वो ढंग से इस्तेमाल हो सके। जब तक यही इशू रहेगा कि वो एरिया आता किसके अंदर, तो वो अंडर डेवलप्ड रह जाए। तो थ्रू द एग्रीमेंट दी कच्चा थीवू आइलैंड ceded to Sri Lanka by the Indian government without consulting the Tamil Nadu state government. Since then, the Indian fishermen have only been allowed access to the island for resting, drying of nets, and the annual Saint Anthony's festival, but not for fishing. Despite the agreement, there is no well-defined maritime boundary between the two countries, leading to Indian fishermen trespassing into Sri Lankan waters in search of better catch. Between 1983 and 2009, Indian fishermen had easier access to rich Sri Lankan waters as the maritime boundary in the Poke Strait was not heavily guarded. In the last few decades, fish and aquatic life in Indian continental shelf has depleted. As a result, more fishermen enter Sri Lankan waters and also resort to use of modern fishing trolleys, which Lankan fishermen are unable to match. तो भैया वो कर नहीं पा रहे थे, हम वहां जाके ऐसी चीजें इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. The Indian fisherman saw a golden business opportunity during the LTTE era as the Sri Lankan government has disallowed the easy movement of Sri Lankan fishermen in waters owing to military operations. Since 2009, the Sri Lankan Navy has tightened surveillance of its northern maritime boundary to half a potential return of Tamil insurgents. With the LTTE war over since those others, there is resurgence of Sri Lankan fishermen in Pork Bay. They were trying to reclaim their legitimate lost base and in the process became engaged in conflict. Thus, in turn, increasing the number of arrests of Indian fishermen. Sri Lankan authorities argue that they are simply protecting the maritime boundaries of the country against poaching and securing the livelihood of Sri Lankan fishermen. अब भैया कर क्या सकते हैं? The Department of Ocean Development and Ministry of Agriculture have to ensure assistance to states so that fishermen are able to find alternative livelihood in fishing in Poke Bay. The Sri Lankan Fisheries and Aquatic Resource Minister appointed a three-member committee to find a lasting solution to the issue. According to a minister, India had accepted a draft solution submitted by Sri Lanka in January last year, but further progress was halted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Sri Lanka had suggested joint patrols and operations between the two countries to guarantee effective results of illegal fishing and trespassing. This is an immediate need to sign a protocol of joint patrolling. Despite having met more than once since 2016, a solution is yet to be finalized irrespective of the circumstances. A potential solution to dispute relies on the response from the respective governments, India and Sri Lanka. If both the countries are unable to settle the dispute, then they could seek assistance from international maritime experts through UN. Very simple language. In a very simple language, I have detailed the PPT as well as the notes. I hope there is no much need to exaggerate these things, to explain more these things. All written here, the content written here is more than sufficient. The Indian government has renewed the thrust on ocean economy in recent times and the PM signing MOU on ocean economy with Sri Lanka, Mauritius and Maldives in 2015. अब आ गया कचुथीवू island issue. Kachuthivu is a small island located about 10 miles northeast of Rameshwaram. The fishermen used it to dry their nets and catch fish. While the zamindari system was abolished, Kachuthari became a part of Presidency of Madras. When India became independent and initiated a boundary negotiation in the maritime level with Sri Lanka, Kachuthivi was in disputed territory between Ceylon and British, and there was never an agreement on boundary ever. 1947 से 1976 तक, as per agreement, the issue was bilaterally resolved between India and Sri Lanka, and resulted maritime agreement has allowed Indians to visit Kachuthivu for pilgrimage, for which no visa is required. The Indian government has maintained that the right of access to Kachuthivu does not cover any fishing rights. तो दिस वॉज दिक्कत जो थी वो आइलैंड इशू। अब बात करते हैं इंडिया भूटान रिलेशन की। इंडियाज रिलेशंस विद भूटान गो बैक टू 747 AD when the Buddhist monk Padma Sambhava went from India to Bhutan and led Naingappa sect of Buddhism. Naingappa sect emerged हुआ. Thus, India contributed to the cultural growth of Buddhism in Bhutan. In the modern times, there are Anglo-Indian Bhutan wars, and Bhutan became a part of British Empire. In 1910, as per the Treaty of Punakha between China, Tibet, and Bhutan, Bhutan was not officially annexed, but the legal status of Bhutan itself remained undefined. Bhutan was given an option by the British to remain independent or to join the Indian Union. Bhutan chose to remain independent. While India became independent in 1947, Nehru went to Bhutan to build relations. Bhutan also preferred India over China as 1949. When China took over Tibet, it did create tensions and fears of annexation on Bhutan. चाइना ने अपना खौफ बना दिया था। Amid growing security concerns over communist China, Indo-Bhutan Treaty was signed in August 1949. There, this is known as a Treaty of Peace and Friendship and was signed in Darjeeling. It is continuation of Anglo-Bhutanese Treaty of 1910. The treaty discusses peace, trade, commerce, and equal justice between India and Bhutan. India accepted sovereign and independent status of Bhutan, but advised that Bhutan, in matters of external affairs, seek assistance from India. India did not interfere in the internal affairs of Bhutan, and in fact, in 1971, took up the matter of UN membership for Bhutan. The Indo-Bhutan Treaty is the bedrock of India and Bhutan's relationship. However, in February 2007, it was revised, which clarifies Bhutan's status as an independent and sovereign nation. Up Treaty of Punakha है क्या? There was some prior working agreement between Bhutan and British India signed in 1865. It was the agreement signed in 1910 at Punakha, Dzong. Under the Treaty of Punakha, British guaranteed Bhutan's independence and Britain guaranteed Bhutan's independence and took control of Bhutanese foreign relations. It also affirmed Bhutanese independence as one of the few Asian kingdoms never conquered by a regional or colonial power. अब 2007 की दो जो ट्रीटी थी इंडो भूटान फ्रेंडशिप ट्रीटी द टू साइड्स हैव एग्रीड टू कोऑपरेट क्लोजली विद each other issues relating to their national interest. Neither government shall allow the use of territory or activities harmful national security एक दूसरे की national security जिससे hamper हो. Under the revised treaty 2007, India and Bhutan will cooperate with each other on matters of national security. There shall be free trade and commerce between the territories of government of Bhutan and government of India. Government of Bhutan shall be free. Trade commerce जो है वो free होगा. Shall be free to import from through India into Bhutan whatever arms, ammunition, machinery desired for the strength and welfare of Bhutan. The government of Bhutan and the government of India agreed to Bhutanese subjects residing in India territories shall have equal justice with Indian subjects, and that Indian subjects residing in Bhutan will have equal justice with subjects of Indian in Bhutan. अब challenges क्या हैं दोनों के रिलेशन में? Ties came under strain in recent times over India. Sudden changes in its power purchasing policy, rigid rates, and refusal to allow Bhutan to join the national power grid and trade with third countries like Bangladesh. A clause has required to exporting power generation company to a majority owned by Indian entity created friction. However, these are being addressed. There are concerns in Bhutan with regard to the environmental risk because of trade, transport, and tourism. India's plans for motor vehicle agreement in Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal grouping are held up. Bhutanese proposal to levy entry charges on India tourists could cause differences. Bhutan में जाके taxes लगते हैं. Earlier, generations of Bhutanese students never looked beyond India. But in recent years, young Bhutanese have shown a preference for education in places like Australia, Singapore, Thailand. वहाँ जा रहे हैं. There are high-level visits from countries like China and USA. बहुत लोग आ रहे हैं भूटान में. China issue in Bhutan. Likewise, that of Sri Lanka, China का enrollment भूटान में बहुत ज़्यादा है. China shares a contiguous border of around 470 किलोमीटर with Bhutan. China does not have official diplomatic relation with Bhutan. There are border dispute between Bhutan and China. China is stepping up pressure on Bhutan to settle the bilateral border dispute in addition to laying claim to more territory in Bhutan. Beijing has revived old Lord swap deal with that will require Thimphu to get control over the territory in order to settle its border dispute with China. अब इंडिया और भूटान के स्पेशल रिलेशंस क्या हैं? नीदर गवर्नमेंट शेल अलाउ द यूज ऑफ टेरिटरी. एक दूसरे के लिए जो मैंने ट्रीटी फ्रेंडशिप ट्रीटी डिस्कस करी थी, दीज पॉइंट्स आर एनमरेटेड फ्रॉम देयर ओनली. तो बेसिकली ये स्पेशल रिलेशंस आते हैं वहाँ से. इंडिया भूटान डेवलपमेंट कोऑपरेशन. India's contribution to Bhutan's socio-economic development began in 1961 with India funding Bhutan's entire first 1961 से 1966 का and second 1967 से 1972 तक का 5-year plans. India is Bhutan's largest development partner and the highest recipient of India's overseas aid. Bhutan received from India a total of $4.7 billion in grants between 2000 से 2017 तक. तो बेसिकली इंडिया भूटान रिलेशंस जो हैं वो इस तरीके से बहुत ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है. अब हमने जो एक टॉपिक स्किप किया स्पेशल रिलेशंस का, उसको भी एक बार देख लेते हैं फिर से. नीदर गवर्नमेंट शेल अलाउ द टेरिटरी. वो बाहर के लोगों से आके वहाँ कोई ऐसी मिलिटेंसी एक्टिविटीज वहाँ हो सके एक दूसरे देश के खिलाफ. भूटान में जाके भूटान की टेरिटरी को कोई इंडिया के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल नहीं करेगा और इंडिया में आके इंडिया की टेरिटरी को कोई भूटान के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल नहीं करेगा. इक्वल जस्टिस फॉर द सब्जेक्ट्स इन ईच अदर टेरिटरीज. दोनों के लोग एक दूसरे की टेरिटरी में अगर रहेंगे तो उनको बराबर न्याय मिलेगा, बराबर अधिकार मिलेगा न्याय के लिए, जो कि वहां के लोगों को. फ्री ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स बिटवीन इंडिया एंड भूटान. जो ट्रेड है उसमें कोई बैरियर्स नहीं रहेंगे, वो फ्री रहेगा. भूटान वट एवर आर्म्स एमिनेशंस. भूटान शैल बी फ्री टू इम्पोर्ट फ्रॉम और थ्रू इंडिया into Bhutan whatever arms, ammunition, machinery, material or stores as may be required. इंडिया से या इंडिया के जरिए भूटान कुछ भी इंपोर्ट कर सकता है, आर्म्स, एमिनेशन, मशीनरी एटसेट्रा. India gives loans for hydroelectric projects and purchase power from Bhutan. इंडिया भूटान का बड़ा भाई होने के नाते उसको सबसे ज्यादा फाइनेंस कर रहा है. इंडिया प्रोवाइड्स बजटरी सपोर्ट टू भूटान्स डेवलपमेंट एंड बैक्स इट अगेंस्ट चाइनीज एक्सपेंशनिज्म. तो चाइना इस मौके का फायदा ना उठा पाए, तो इंडिया जो है भूटान का सबसे ज्यादा फाइनेंस कर रहा है. तो बेसिकली आज हमने इंडिया और श्रीलंका, इंडिया और भूटान, दो कंट्रीज के रिलेशंस आपस में देखे. स्ट्रेटेजिकली बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट, बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है. श्रीलंका इज इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज ऑफ द सी रूट्स. भूटान क्योंकि इंडिया और चाइना दोनों के साथ लगता है, इसलिए भूटान की इंपॉर्टेंस भी बहुत. अब बेसिकली ये रिलेशन सब कंट्रीज के साथ बनाने अच्छे क्यों हैं? क्योंकि ये नेबरिंग कंट्रीज की टेरिटरी को इस्तेमाल ना किया जाए एक बेस बना के इंडिया के खिलाफ रणनीति बनाने का. इसलिए हमारा इनके साथ रिलेशन होना बहुत अच्छा है, फ्रेंडली रिलेशन होना बहुत अच्छा है, और एट एनी कॉस्ट हमें वो बनाने भी चाहिए. सो आपसे अगर क्वेश्चन पूछा जाएगा तो डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन होगा, व्हाट आर द टेंशंस बिटवीन दी टू कंट्रीज, और व्हाट इज द वे फॉरवर्ड, और what kind of commercial relations, what kind of relations do we share with the नेशन। इट्स वेरी सिंपल। आई होप जितना भी हमने पढ़ा आज क्लियर होगा। टिल देन, गुड बाय, सी यू इन द नेक्स्ट लेक्चर।